After months of study, I proudly present this Arcana's index entry of Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden, the definitive analysis, world, and mana compendium. The world. New Eden was named with hope, yet its soil never surrendered to that promise. A human attempt to etch permanence upon a land that has never asked for it. The town is the axis of this frontier, the fragile heart of a world that beats with stranger rhythms than the settlers dare admit. Beyond its timber walls rise the dark woods, a labyrinth, where daylight falters and silence listens. The air here carries loam and moss, thick with the breath of centuries. Roots knot themselves like veins, feeding on generations of decay, and the forest grows fat upon the dead. To walk these woods is to feel oneself swallowed into memory, where the living voice is hushed by the weight of all who have walked before. The settlers fear the wolves, but the deeper dread is that the trees themselves bear witness, that the woods remember what men tried to forget. Climbing from the tree line, the land heaves into Mount Pleasant. Its name speaks of settlers' optimism, but its cliffs are sharp and its winds howl like the voices of the unburied. The climb strips the body of warmth and breath, yet offers vistas that drown the eye, the colony shrinking into insignificance below. Here the air tastes of iron and snow, a vertical ladder between earth and sky. To ascend is to court both revelation and ruin. The swamp is a crucible of rot and renewal, where soil and water blur. Pools reflect the sky in broken fragments, reeds sway like spears, and mists coil low, clinging to the ankles. The air is pungent, alive with the drone of insects, yet beneath its stagnant surface stir eels, leeches, and stranger things. And farther still, the land collapses into the harrows. Trees wither into skeletal forms, their branches clawing at a pale sky. The soil thins into sand scarred with gallows, shallow graves, and fields salted with silence. Even the wind here feels weighted, carrying the taste of iron and the echo of sorrow. These five regions form a whole. The colony that dreams of order, the forest that swallows memory, the mountain that demands ascent, the fen that transmutes decay. To walk its paths is to discover that the world itself is the first haunting. The Fool. Our banishers arrive at New Eden to attend to the restless shadows that plague the town, to solve the case of nightmares that have long haunted its streets. They cross the sea to aid a friend, Reverend Charles Davenport, a man of faith and reason, a banishers himself rooted in Catholic traditions, whose knowledge of spirits had once guided them both. They stepped onto the shore believing the challenge would be measured, a task in which their skill and courage could suffice. The truth strikes them with a weight they had not imagined. Charles is dead. His heart, steadfast yet human, gave out as he confronted the spirit threatening the settlers' dreams. The town, born of hope and divine aspiration, trembles in despair. The settlers' faith flickers weakly, and their dreams curl into shadow. Esther Davenport, once radiant with warmth and learning, drifts through her home, grief rendered into substance, speaking with trembling conviction of her husband's lingering presence. Red and Antea guide both the living and the dead through this first tangled knot of New Eden. Charles, now a spirit tethered to love and devotion, cannot leave her side. In aiding him, they honor the fragile humanity that clings even beyond the grave. They soothe Esther's mourning, lay Charles to a gentler place, and for a moment restore some measure of balance to the haunted town. Yet the trials of the fool are never neat. Red, weary, and misjudging the true reach of the nightmare, drifts into sleep at the wrong moment. When he awakens, the world is changed. His partner seems lost to the claws of the dreams that weave through New Eden streets, leaving him suspended between fear and action. It is a beginning unlike any other, brimming with potential, shadowed by danger, and marked by the raw lesson that every first step into the unknown is both promise and peril. This is the fool's path. the bold arrival, the misjudged magnitude, the brush with loss, and the trembling first lesson that even a seasoned banishers must learn anew in the haunted, half-remembered world of New Eden. The Magician. In New Eden, knowledge is a weapon, and the banishers are its wielders. Their rituals carve meaning into the veil. The ritual of hearkening calls forth echoes of the past, the residue of choice that stains the air. Make manifest draws the invisible into form, coaxing spirit into matter, summon scourge binds wrath to the banisher's will, and void, traveling, a question cast into the abyss itself, threads the silent corridors between worlds. Each rite is a dialogue with reality, each spell a mirror held up to consequence, and at the center of it all stands Antia. She is the magician made phantom, or perhaps the other way around. After death, she acquires new abilities, and with every feat on the Beyond, she grows her new mastery. Her unveiled ability tears open the hidden fabric of the world. Through her, Red glimpses what no mortal eyes should see. Her leap crosses the gulf between incarnate and invisible, being able to traverse portals of spectral symmetry. Her outburst shatters matter, blowing away all around her as a spectral cannon. Her ensnare binds the enemies into spectral webs, and through fusion she joins with Red, Banisher, and Ghost, Sword, and Mantle, cutting through the biggest threads with ease and laughter, becoming the archetype's perfect expression. In the Harrows, a hamlet rotting under its own guilt, Lamentation Haskell conjures through curiosity, making wards and trinkets learned in old books. Ashamed of his father's witch hunts, Lammy steals the grimoires his father tried to burn. He studies the forbidden, searching for the truth that fear had buried. Beneath an abandoned mill, he builds a laboratory inside the void, a sanctum of intellect in the world's shadow. The curse devouring the Harrows is no witchcraft. It is a sickness leaking from the abyss, an echo of injustice. The death of Deborah, wrongly condemned by those who feared what they could not grasp. Lammy does not seek dominion, he seeks understanding. He is the magician in his purest form, the will to know, and the peril of knowing too much. Edith Kane, the magician reversed. Far East, in the dark woods, Edith Kane wove illusions of her own. When her brother Daniel found a treasure map, she feared betrayal. So she forged another, a lie, a manipulation of greed and mistrust. Daniel followed it into the wild and bled beneath the wolves. And in the echo of his death, the truth emerged. Edith's ways are the ways of deception, her charm, her grief, her trembling lies, each a conjuration meant to bend the world her way. Ferdinando Miller, the Shadowed Magician. On Mount Pleasant, Ferdinando Miller spun his own kind of spell. A ghost named Rebecca Hardgrave called his name in longing, but the truth was older, darker. Rebecca had once owned him. He was her slave, his affection a performance, his survival an act of mastery. Ferdinando is the magician's shadow, the power of perception as shield, the manipulation of appearances without cruelty, the control born not from arrogance, but from necessity. Perry Cottle. Back in the Harrows, the smell of bread still mingles with guilt. Perry Cottle, the baker, loved his craft with holy fervor, but scarcity twisted devotion into desperation. He hounded Lucy Barrow for her secret ingredient, and when she died, the village whispered poison. The Banishers found the truth. Lucy had killed herself by mistake, but Perry's sin remained. The coercion, the pride, the hunger to create at any cost. The hands that shaped bread became the hands that shaped ruin. The magician's gift turned inward, transmuted into shame. To be a magician is to command the veil and risk dissolving into it. The High Priestess. The High Priestess governs every unsolved haunting across New Eden. When a ghost refuses to speak, when a memory flickers incomplete, when a ritual fails for reasons no banisher can name, In New Aiden, what seems past returns in altered form. What seems future presses from behind the veil, whispering as if memory itself were haunted. Ceridian knows this intimately. When she greets Red and Antea, her words shimmer with recognition. She has met them before, perhaps years ago, perhaps tomorrow. Her speech bends chronology like light through water. The swamp around her mirrors this distortion, its reflections showing the folds of time collapsing inward. Her home, the swamp's heart, where water reflects sky and roots hold corpses, holds obscured truths. Her rituals speak through inversion, to heal by poison, to summon by banishment, to see by blindness. Her art is remembered, drawn from the secret correspondences between mud, crow's wings, and earth's scales. Those who look closely see that her face is not merely familiar, it is identical to the seeker's. The same eyes that once peered from behind riddles now glimmer beneath the witch's hood. The two names mark the same soul stretched along a spiral of experience. The Trismegistus riddles she once crafted to hide herself have become the very fog that cloaks her dwelling. Her concealment spell, once a tool of survival, has matured into the swamp's living enchantment, a world perpetually hidden from itself. Through her, the High Priestess transcends linear existence. Student and master, question and oracle. Her dialogues with Red and Antea echoes traveling backward through the spiral of time, shaping the past even as they arise from the future. Fear. God Waterbury, in his own dark way, touches the same current. His cursed chests are tombs for desire, each one a confession locked away from divine scrutiny. In his ritual of spirit unbounding, he sought to strip the material from the spiritual, yet only succeeded in binding them tighter. The high priestess marks him as her penitent, a man who feared the judgment of light and so chose to live among the secrets of the earth. Lammy Haskell, scholar of the Arululu, represents the priestess's intellectual devotion. His fascination with the void was less curiosity than worship. He treated the unseen not as emptiness but as the womb of all potential. The void, the Arululu, is that sacred pause between worlds, the unutterable syllable of creation that neither ascends nor descends. To study it is to risk being swallowed by it. Lammy's Leonard concealment spell, born from that study, becomes his act of reverence, a way to let the unknown remain unknowable. The Empress. The creeping ivy is the first Arviden form of twited flora, and nature's grip around the land. Its tendrils are slow but certain, curling through broken walls and unburied sorrow, making sanctuaries of what has fallen. In a world where death lingers and spirits refuse to move on, the ivy is the only thing that never stops growing. Esther Davenport. When Red and Antea finally reach New Aden, they seek their friend Reverend Charles Davenport and instead find his widow Esther, pale, exhausted, and adrift in grief. Her house is immaculate but airless, every surface polished as if she could scrub away the void. She feels her husband's presence, hears his voice, folds his clothes as though preparing him for some distant journey. Esther's case shows her nurturing and caring. When Red and Antea free Charles's ghost, she prays not for herself, but for him, that he may rest somewhere warm, somewhere clean with fresh ebbed folded laundry. Nellie Hayton, The Forge Reborn, The Dark Woods, Hammer and Tongs. In the smoke and clangor of the forge, Nellie Hayton's story burns hot and human. She and her lover Arthur Carty killed her abusive husband Fortune at sea. His ghost returns, waterlogged and furious, to claim his tools, his name, his wife. Yet Nellie does not cower. She meets death's claim with the same iron she once swung in self-defense. Her nurturing is the kind that grows teeth. Through her, the Empress takes the form of survival, creation through destruction. She and Arthur rekindle the forge, melt old iron into new shapes, and build a life by their shared resilience. She proves that the act of care can be violent when the world demands silence from the gentle. Anne Wings, the eternal caretaker, Mount Pleasant, she comes at night. In Mount Pleasant's sick room, Anne Wings died tending to a patient who spat at her in fury, infecting her with the very illness she tried to heal. Even in death, she continues to care for him, haunting the infirmary, ministering to a man who believes her ghost wants vengeance. Her haunting is a cycle of compassion unable to stop turning. She cannot accept that her work is done. The empress within her has become eternal, a mother who cannot stop nursing, a healer who cannot accept that healing sometimes means letting go. When Red and Antea help her understand she is dead, she releases her charge, and the air clears. Her devotion, once poisonous, becomes sacred again, a return to balance. Anne Wings is the Empress in her purest form, love so absolute that it transcends mortality and must be gently reminded that to nurture endlessly is to die twice. Elizabeth O'Hara. By the river in the Harrows, spectral mist in their form of poems scattered the ground, and within it stands Elizabeth O'Hara, poet, lover, protector. She died bound to Mary Clare, her partner masquerading as her sister to survive a puritanical world. In death, Elizabeth becomes a guardian spirit, her poetry shaping spectral ties that shield her beloved from harm. In all these stories, the Empress is the law of life's persistence. Her symbols, ivy, hearth, blood, breath, bind the living and the dead in one ecosystem. It is the green memory of the Empress herself, crawling ever upward through the rot, whispering her doctrine, that all things must grow, even through grief. The Emperor, Captain Pennington, master of Fort Jericho, embodies the Emperor's corruption through command. The walls of the fort are high, its garrison weary, its discipline eroded by fear. Pennington stands amid this decay, still clinging to military order as if law could substitute for conscience. He calls himself protector, but his leadership is infected by suspicion. The minds beneath his rule fester with spectral unrest, the ghosts of those he condemned in the name of order. The puppeteer's presence in the caverns is not random. It is the reflection of his repression, the tangible shadow of control enforced without compassion. When Helen Priest rises against him, Pennington sees only treachery, never the moral rot within his own command. Even when spared, he remains unrepentant, his rigidity intact. Yet his tragedy deepens beyond the fortress. He is the father of Seeker Grace, the witch he drove away for her heresy. His own blood became rebellion incarnate, the empire of his family undone by the same tyranny he inflicted on soldiers and daughter alike. He is the emperor corrupted, the general who cannot imagine love outside obedience, who mistakes stillness for stability, and thus rules over silence instead of order. Governor Fairfax Haskell brings the emperor's ambition to its highest and most poisonous form, the governance of souls. In the Harrows, he stands as a scholar-statesman fluent in rhetoric, bound to the ideal of civilization as control. His judgments are dressed in eloquence, his edicts in reason. Yet beneath the language of progress lies fear. When New Eden trembled before illness and superstition, he chose sacrifice, condemning Deborah, an innocent woman, as a witch to preserve the illusion of order. He executed her to protect his people, and in doing so birthed the infamy, a vengeful entity made of ooze, mud, and moral residue. Justice warped into pestilence. The emperor in Haskell is clothed in intellect. His rule is defended by logic rather than violence. But the consequence is the same. The Harrow's sickness mirrors his own spiritual infection, the poison of governance turned inward. His son, Lamentation Haskell, becomes his antithesis, a seeker of forbidden truths, an heir trying to rebuild a world his father destroyed through righteousness. In Lammy, authority gives way to inquiry, order dissolves into curiosity, a necessary rebellion that keeps the hermetic flame alive. Haskell's downfall completes the emperor's cycle. From the forge to the fort to the colony, authority without empathy collapses beneath its own weight. Each ruler believed the same lie, that control can be pure, that dominion can be moral, that command can substitute for wisdom. Authority without spirit is but an echo in a haunted hall. The Hierophant. In the dark woods, Faith wore the robes of trade. Squire Sincere Paris prayed with one hand and signed contracts with the other. His shop, haunted by the ghost of his partner Jane, was filled with goods that reeked faintly of damnation. Jane's tribe had perished under a wave of smallpox. Blankets sold by Paris, infected and sanctified by the words, "Their fate lies in God's hands." When Jane rose from death, it was not to seek peace, but vengeance. Her ghost stalked the swamps, hunting the hummingbird mercenaries who had carried Paris's bargain to its bloody end. Yet the true sin lay not in ignorance, but in justification. Paris was not an evil man, merely one who believed that commerce could coexist with conscience. His faith became a shield against his own complicity. When confronted by Jane's spectral fury, the squire did not resist. In him, the Hierophant reversed reveals its face. Piety wielded as prophet, repentance born too late to save. Across Mount Pleasant, another preacher's creed rotted behind closed doors. John Rumball was a man of scripture, calloused hands clutching a Bible like a weapon. His wife Abigail had turned away from worship, and in his wounded pride he wished her gone, words that became curse. When Abigail took her own life, something darker filled the silence, a demon wearing her voice like a veil. Yet the haunting sprang from Rumball's sin, not his theology. John's faith was formed without spirit, expected devotion as a habit, not a revelation. In the end, his prayers were answered by his own destruction. In the Harrows, faith became delirium. The siblings Marcy and Hugh Batchelor lived their scriptures so devoutly that it consumed them. Marcy, frail and radiant, claimed to hear the voice of God. Her fasting transformed into a ritual of starvation. In her eyes, suffering became sanctity. Her brother Hugh, the learned schoolteacher, saw her madness as miracle. He preached her pain as prophecy, exalting her until she withered into legend. When the Banishers found her, Marcy's ghost still murmured in riddles, half beatific, half broken. She believed herself an angel redeemed by agony. Hugh stood by her corpse as if before an altar, unrepentant, convinced that holiness required the crucifixion of the self. In them both, the Hierophant's corruption blooms fully, faith weaponized against the faithful. The teacher becomes the zealot, the saint becomes the victim. Together, they form the inverted catechism of New Eden, that devotion without discernment is indistinguishable from madness. The Lovers. At the center are Red McWraith and Antea Duarte, twin souls bound in paradox, lovers, partners, and now banisher and ghost. Their love is both compass and curse, for their union defies the world's most sacred boundary. When Antea dies, Red's path forks, to resurrect her by stealing life from the living or to honor her by freeing the dead. It is the lover's riddle. Will passion serve love or consume it? Their bond animates the moral spine of the entire world, a mirror through which all other loves in New Eden reflect their shadows. Among those mirrors stands Kate Newsmith and Deborah, whose love could never survive the wilderness's law. In secret, they found tenderness. In fear, Kate betrayed it. Deborah died, and grief rotted into the beast, an unholy creation born from the rage of abandoned souls. When Red confronts the scourge, its many mouths cry of betrayal, of sisters, of lovers, of promises broken. Thick-skin, hardened by survival, sacrificed the weak. Kate, hardened by guilt, ran from her own heart. Two sisters, two wounds, both trying to lead, both haunted by the same ghost of love denied. The beast's death leaves them facing each other, forced to rebuild trust with care. Even amid blood and guilt, the lovers still demand recognition of tenderness once forgotten. Then there is Prudence and Thomas Hake, a union twisted by secrets yet enduring beyond death. Prudence hides her nature, a French spy in a British colony, a woman living two lives under one name. Thomas, her husband, learns too late who she truly is, yet even in death he returns to protect. He urges her to flee, to survive, to live free of him. Their love becomes an act of mercy, a quiet absolution. Through them, the lovers show a truth more somber than romance. Love's endurance is not in possession, but in release. On that note, Rebecca Hartgrave, her story the most poisoned blossom of all. She loved Ferdinando Miller with desperate hunger, trying to make devotion substitute for justice. He, shackled first by iron and then by inheritance, wore the mask of affection until her death. In her final act, she freed him and gave him her fortune, hoping that love might buy forgiveness. But affection born from ownership cannot heal. Her ghost lingers, clutching illusions of tenderness that never were. Love becomes the measure of the human soul, selfless or selfish, redemptive or ruinous. In every haunted cabin, every trembling heart, the same truth murmurs beneath the wind. Love can also be the binding that makes ghosts of us all. The Chariot. The movement of purpose through the haunted lands. Helen Priest embodies that drive to motion even in grief. When the Banishers arrive at Fort Jericho, the gates are barred, the fort's courage exhausted, its captain eroded by guilt. The world has stopped moving. Yet beyond those gates, Helen is already in motion, gathering supplies, surviving in the dark, fighting for her life beside the ghost of her husband. She is both the lost traveler and the unbroken general, still advancing while others entrench. Within the suffocating tunnels beneath the fort, the truth of her motion is revealed. Her husband's specter is no companion, but a puppet, his body and memories strung along by an ancient entity of iron and vengeance. The puppeteer. When Helen emerges from that subterranean maze, she has learned the most terrible kind of momentum, the will to overthrow her commanding officer, Captain Pennington. She wishes to move forward again, not as a usurper, but as a banisher. Her journey embodies the chariot's higher octave, from blind propulsion to self-directed purpose. Nathaniel Sather in Search for His Owned Money by Bathsheba Ingersoll, who clung to her late husband's enterprise as if it could stop time itself. Nathaniel's corpse lies in the forest, his ghost bound by resentment, his motion forever arrested by betrayal. Bathsheba's hands clutch her keys and ledgers like reins she cannot release. Their haunting is a stalled journey, ambition without integrity, the chariot mired in mud. But Nathaniel never quit. Even after death, he demanded the money owed to him to care for his male lover in a faraway land. The chariot endures because for some it keeps riding even when the road is lost. Strength. The land itself speaks the language of strength. The dark woods rumble with teeth and howls, where the line between predator and protector blurs. In the bestial hearts of the woods, thick-skinned Newsmith's creed, "Only the strong survive," is the voice of raw instinct. She sends her weaker settlers to their deaths, believing sacrifice is the price of survival. Yet the beast that rises from that slaughter is her mirror, a creation of her creed, a scourge of flesh and spirit, howling her name. The beast is the purest emblem of strength without compassion, a primal storm born from betrayal and grief. Its sinews are guilt, its growl, a chorus of those who died unheard. To face it is to stare into the abyss of power untamed. Then comes Jacob Lind, the starving trapper. His body fails before his mind does. His hunger devours his humanity. When he kills and eats his friend Benedict, we see strength at its breaking point. His madness is not monstrous, it is what remains when instinct swallows reason. Yet when Benedict's ghost forgives him, a new kind of strength arises, the kind that faces horror without denial. The moment is savage and sacred. Jacob's tears, marks of his truest defiance of the beast within. And in the mountains above Mount Pleasant, Flora Abbott stands as the hunter who understands restraint. Against Theodore Shepard's racist bile and ghostly hatred, she refuses to yield to rage. She does not meet venom with venom, nor answer his haunting with fear. Her calm precision, her refusal to be reduced to the hatred that defined him, is strength's gentlest incarnation, the lion tamed by dignity. She kills the beast of bigotry with composure. True strength lies in the restraint that separates the hunter from the monster, the hermit. In the hollow between realms, where frost gnaws at the edges of thought and moss smothers every name carved into stone, a lantern glows, flickering fire that illuminates only the bearer's own path. This is the path of the hermit, and in New Eden its steps belong to the seeker. She drifts between the incarnate and the invisible with no companion but her own doubts, her own notes. In her journals, half confession, half incantation, she records the erosion of time and certainty. Am I ready? She writes. The question is not for her mistress, but for herself. She carries Cyrodian's teachings like a candle cupped from the wind, yet the teachings flicker and elongate, distorted by the rifted spaces she inhabits. Each step she takes is a meditation in movement, the hermit's wandering through liminal ground. Moments contract until weeks collapse into a blink. The hermit walks willingly into this monastery of space and time. Even Lucy Barrow, though rooted in the harrows rather than the rifts, becomes a hermit figure both in life and death. Her alehouse was once a center of her own studies, but in her final days she moved inward, scribbling her chronicles of the curse while the seasons lost their rhythm. She mistook herbs and poisoned herself under the pressure of secrecy and isolation. No one to warn her, no friend to double check the plant. Her ghost lingers with only one obsession, narrowed as a tunnel, losing the wider world as all hermits risk doing. Her own entries echo the seeker's, time sliding, memory dissolving, the wind on the hill whispering as the only witness. Both women embody the hermit's paradox, isolation but also as initiation. The seeker's solitude grants her insight into the geometry of the two worlds. Lucy's solitude, tragic and unintended, becomes a mirror of the town's hidden sickness. Between them flows the archetype's essence, to hold a light where no one else dares, to keep record when memory collapses, to question what the meeting house hides, even if no answer comes. Wheel of Fortune. Theodore's death, slipping, stumbling, plummeting into eternity, illustrates the sheer indifference of fate. No malice, no haunting curse, just gravity and timing. His story reminds us that death often hides in the ordinary, a misstep, a soft patch of earth, a momentary lapse of focus. Even the wise are vulnerable to the shuffle of circumstance. The same invisible current that drowns a man might spare his neighbor. The same misfortune that kills one soul may grant another enlightenment. After all, the wheel doesn't need to conspire, it only needs to turn once more. Justice. Every single haunting case is presented with a closure and three choices: to blame the living, to ascend the soul, or to banish the ghost. Justice here is done by the protagonist's choices, latter to be taken into score for latter judgment. Jedediah. Scudder's story is a wound carved by inheritance. A father hanged for his crimes, choking on his own violence, seeks from beyond to spare his son from the same rope, but blood carries memory, and memory carries guilt. Beloved Scudder lives in the shadow of his father's gallows, fearing that his hands, already soiled by a stone thrown in weakness, will fulfill a prophecy of sin. Yet the true infection lies elsewhere. Credence Scudder, charming as a fox in borrowed innocence, wove deceit so thoroughly that it mimicked fate itself. He shaped another man's ruin as though destiny were his craft. Jedediah, beloved, Credence. Each acts, each blames, and each becomes caught in the tightening web of causality. When the banisher lays judgment upon Credence, Justice turns, and the scales tremble anew. The beast rises and cries as embodiment of collective injustice, a scourge born of abandoned souls. The settlers' sacrifice for survival return as a chorus of accusation. This is justice's cruelest form, the eternal awareness of one's deed. Yet the purest manifestation of justice lies in the harrows. The ghost of Deborah, executed unjustly as a witch, curdled into a spectral mass of retribution. The infamy, the ooze, is a metaphysical judge. It weighs guilt by outcome. It asks, who profited from the lie? Who suffered its echo? It is the inversion of the mortal court where rhetoric triumphs and truth is drowned. In this spectral tribunal, every act is both crime and confession. The ooze leaps until all falsehood dissolves. In the eyes of this world, almost no one is innocent, and every verdict echoes into the next life. The Hanged Man. The forest speaks this arcana first through Benedict and Jacob Lind, the trappers whose tale festers in the dark woods. Hunger binds them, guilt suspends them. Benedict's ghost lingers to release, he demands confession. Only when Jacob admits the unbearable truth does the air loosen, and the world creaks forward once more. The same pattern echoes in Andrew White, the old veteran haunted by the ghost of his fallen comrade Joshua Gouge. Andrew's nightmares are his noose. He lives in self-imposed suspension, hung from guilt. Joshua's silent spirit waits. He waits for Andrew to speak the truth aloud, to break the stillness of unspoken remorse. The false ritual Red performs for Andrew is an act of mercy disguised as deception, a trick of faith to let him descend from his own cross. The mines of Mount Pleasant cradle the giant's suspended soul, the puppeteer, the bound remnant of Deborah Comenius's torment. Chains are its veins, vengeance, its breath. Around it move Captain Pennington ensnared in a stalemate of guilt and control. Deborah's own suffering reverberates through this haunting. The woman once shackled and accused now reappears as the metaphysical pattern of imprisonment itself. The puppeteer embodies the dread of stasis. Its existence is a frozen scream, unjust death distorting time. Hephzibah Perkins, the old widow of the Harrows, drifts between these fractures. She is both alive and dead, both the hand that cast the first stone and the ghost that begs herself to stop. Her hanged body on the ship's mast is a sigil of temporal collapse, the moment of execution forever replaying itself. Her amnesia is not forgetfulness but spiritual paralysis, the mind's defense against the unbearable stillness of guilt. Through her, New Eden reveals its secret. It is a world caught mid-fall, suspended in the instant of Deborah's death. The hanged man is the state of the world itself. In the Harrows, Caleb Watson lives this arcana as internal imprisonment. His body becomes the rope binding three souls, himself, his brother Alexander, and his wife Ruth. Possession here is a metaphysical knot, each spirit tugging against the other, unable to release. The hanged man's enlightenment always arrives through letting go, and Caleb's story is the grotesque anatomy of that truth. Then there is Ismail Law, whose surrender to drink mirrors his surrender to despair. The ghost of his wife, Bess, smashes bottles in protest, trying to sever the chain of addiction and grief that binds him to Phoebe Walcott, the living embodiment of temptation. The haunting ends only when the false comfort, the poison of stagnation, is destroyed. The hanged man teaches that to remain suspended too long in grief is to rot. One must let the bottle fall. In New Eden, that moment of stasis stretches unnaturally long, as if the world itself cannot decide whether to breathe or to hang. The Banishers are the ones capable of its release. Death. In this world where the dead do not rest, the 13th arcana is everywhere, rippling through every haunting, every farewell unspoken. Yet few embody its deeper truth as wholly as Antea and Seridean, two spirits who reveal that death is never an end but a threshold. Antea's death ruptures the order of things. Her sight, now sharpened by the void, perceives what the living refuse to, how memories cling like moss to the ruins of the world. She moves through the spectral and the material at once. Death has stripped away her boundaries, and in doing so, she sees that the line between body and soul was always an illusion. Each ghost she encounters reflects her own paradox, existence after the dissolution of self. The witch of the elder tree understood this truth long before the moment came. Her death was a conscious crossing. She seated herself beneath the old tree, the same tree that had watched generations rise and fall and surrendered to the turning of her own season. When her breath faded, the elder blossomed. In her stillness, life unfurled. Such is the secret of death. It feeds the next becoming. Seridean became the seed of her own renewal. A whisper passed to the next seeker, perhaps even to Red, who must learn that every banishment is a kind of burial, and every choice between life and death reshapes the soil of fate. Temperance. In the long twilight of New Eden, there is a hush between extremes, a narrow, sacred interval where flame meets frost, life brushes against death, and Red and Antea learn that harmony is forged. This is the realm of temperance, the arcana of fusion, and the slow art of restoration. Each of their journeys begins with imbalance. A banisher sundered from his beloved, a spirit torn from her body, a world trembling between belief and ruin. Yet every campfire becomes an alchemical vessel, a crucible of quiet thought where rage and grief are distilled into something purer. The smoke that curls upward is the exhalation of understanding, the slow transmutation of pain into wisdom. New Eden itself becomes the alchemical retort, fire and ice, spirit and flesh, guilt and grace, everything simmers in its volatile balance. And in this landscape, Red and Antea are no longer hunter and ghost, but twin reagents seeking their final solution. The Banisher's path, then, is more than exorcism or resurrection, but the alchemy of becoming, the art of keeping the impossible balance between duty and devotion, so that one day the mixture might finally clear and reveal the philosopher's light beneath the ash. The Devil. Phoebe Walcott, the bottle and the chain. Phoebe's tavern reeks of spilled liquor and laughter that curdles at the edges. She drinks to forget and forces her only friend, Ismail Law, to follow her down the same spiral. The ghost of Beslaw breaks bottles to protect him, yet even in death, her love imprisons him. Every figure in this haunting is chained to addiction, to affection, to the hollow comfort of dependence. The devil's gift here is the illusion of relief. Phoebe believes she gives solace when she is only spreading her sickness. Ismail mistakes submission for kindness. Even Bess's protective rage binds her to the living world. It is a perfect triangle of vice, faith, and guilt, each link forged from yearning for control over another's salvation. Calandra, the childhood phantom that seduced Antea through affection, only to bear its monstrous form in fire, and the demon that possessed Abigail Rumball through her reflection, wearing friendship as disguise. Both are archetypal temptresses, the shadow that studies your heart until it learns how to mimic love. Abigail's loneliness becomes her undoing, her husband's bitterness, her fading faith. Each crack in her spirit becomes a door. It reflects what the victim most wants to see. That is the devil's oldest mirror trick, to show a truth so comforting that one willingly kneels before it. It only waits for us to look into the mirror and mistake the reflection for salvation. The Tower. In Banishers, the tower is the sound of a world cracking beneath the weight of its own illusions. New Eden stands as the ruin of human certainty, a settlement built on conviction now swallowed by the void it refused to see. The colonists raised their walls and prayers against the unknown, yet what they feared seeped in through the marrow of their faith. The tower's essence is upheaval, the moment when form can no longer hold spirit. The land itself mirrors this collapse. The beasts that once roamed the forests have fled or starved, sensing the invisible contagion that festers around the nightmare's domain. Hunger gnaws at the living, despair hollows them from within. What remains of nature trembles under the echo of the curse, and within that poisoned air the specters whirl, manifest storms of grief, black vortices of pain that spin and devour. They are the tower's smoke, the spiritual debris of a civilization imploding from within. Each tornado of sorrow an indictment, the collective scream of all that was denied, buried, and broken. Souls caught in the spiral become indistinguishable from the storm itself, swallowed by their own unfinished lamentations. Children are lost to this collapse. In the face of scarcity, some must be abandoned, some forgotten. When Red and Antea traverse New Eden, they walk through the aftermath of that divine lightning strike, the breaking of illusion. The tower has already fallen. What remains is the descent, the slow, dreadful realization that even the soul's architecture has crumbled. New Eden's meeting house, encircled by the nightmare's shadow, becomes the perfect tower, proud, cursed, and struck down by revelation. Every ghost in its streets, every cry through the fog, is part of the same collapse, humanity awakening to the cost of its own blindness. Through ruin, revelation, through fire, sight, the tower stands in its fall, and the fall becomes its truth. That moment when the nightmare casts Red from the meeting house. He is flung from the height of confrontation into the abyss of the sea, stripped of certainty, stripped of Antea, stripped of purpose. For a time he is dead to everything, adrift, numb, the ghost of his own failure. The tower's lightning cracked his identity. No banisher, no lover, no savior, only a body in the current. The sea accepts him the way ruin accepts a fallen building, scattering him into its silence. The seeker's rescue arises the possibility of a new form, though the memory of collapse still trembles in his bones. They pull from the water a man unmade, a remnant of a belief that can no longer hold. The star. When Red and Antea wander the ruins of faith and fear, they stumble upon tokens that refuse to fade, those ethereal fragments that pulse with life's residue. A spectral lantern glowing in fog so dense it devours sound. Each of these is a star, a testament that meaning endures even after the world collapses upon itself. New Eden, for all its decay, is an unfinished vessel, and the Banisher's flame is the spark that may yet refine it. And so, in this haunted colony of the damned, every small mercy, every act of compassion, breaks the clouds of ruin for the first enabling lights. The moon. The nightmare's fog drifts through the settlement. People wake screaming from visions they cannot name, their minds eroded by phantoms shaped from their own guilt. Some wander into the woods and never return. Some take their own lives to silence what the moon has shown them. Yet beneath this madness lies the card's secret rhythm. Illusion is never merely deceit, it is revelation by distortion. Then comes Prudence Hake. The moons, the numbers that haunt her walls are not madness, but a language of exhaustion. Her deliverance is not found in confession or capture, but in withdrawal. The moon waning, surviving by concealment. And Abigail Rumball, the mirror's captive, offers the moon its most tragic hymn. Loneliness made her glass, and something darker saw its opening. The entity that filled her emptiness was merely the shape her sorrow had already taken. Bly Manor becomes the moon's chamber, a place where isolation breeds phantoms and neglect becomes its own haunting. The mirror's shimmer teaches the same lesson as the card. What we see is never the full shape of what is. The sun. Every time Red and Antea resolve a haunting, every spirit released upward or condemned downward, a pinprick of gold pierces the murk. These are heliotropes blooming in the dark. Each truth revealed and each guilt acknowledged forms another ray of daylight in a world enshrouded by shadows. Red's own path, torn between resurrecting Antea or accepting her ascension, glows with this archetype. When he acts from insight rather than desperation, his choices feel like sunlight on the skin after winter. An ascended soul, freed of regret, becomes a rising sun whose light spreads beyond the grave. These moments accumulate until New Eden itself feels less like a charnel maze and more like a landscape ready for its closure. Judgment. The last reckoning is made by the Banishers and their choices along the way. When they return to the meeting house, the circle closes where it first began. The nightmare, once born of fear and failure, curls again around Antea's body, waiting for the verdict that will either unmake or renew it. Retribution stands before them as a mirror of all their deeds, wearing the griefs of those spared and the silence of those condemned. Deborah Comedius, that wraith of wronged empathy, waits in the margins. If Red and Antea choose resurrection, the ritual of lesser palingenesis unfolds. From flesh to word to heart, air to fire, fire to earth, ending to beginning indivisible, death to the living, life to the dead. With these words, the elements reconcile. The circle of decay folds into creation. The curse of New Aden dissolves, and Antea returns, not as spirit, but as the living proof that even in a land ruled by ghosts, life can be restored by love. Judgment, in this form, is a second dawn. If instead ascension is chosen, Antea rises in radiance. The words spoken are the oldest truth in Banisher lore: life to the living, death to the dead. Deborah's sorrow, long pressed into the soil, softens. Justice, true justice, which neither spares nor punishes but acknowledges, touches her at last. The curse lifts, and for once the dead of New Eden feel understood enough to let go. Both endings are final acts of balance. Judgment in Ghosts of New Eden is the grand synthesis of choice, the union of justice and mercy, of human frailty and divine order. What began as vengeance becomes remembrance. In this closing moment, the horn of reckoning is questioned. After all that has been done, who have we become? The world, revisited. The circle closes and the land exhales. Penance loosens its grip on the soil. The judgment has been spoken by our hand, by our hearts, by whatever remains of the covenant between the living and the dead. Here, in this quiet after sound, every spirit, every wound, every oath finds its place in the pattern. The curse, so long mistaken for a punishment, reveals its deeper nature as a mirror, forcing those bound within it to see the shape of their choices reflected endlessly. If we fail, that mirror reforms. Circle drags us once more from the freezing sea, the nightmare coils anew, and time resumes its circle of salt and sorrow. But if we succeed, if the verdict was true enough to still the restless dead, then the mirror shatters, the curse departs. The land lies barren, yes, but silence is not always death. In time, the roots will push through the ash again. The world is synthesis, the joining of every arcana before it, every fragment of moral weight and spiritual strain. And Red himself, his future now becomes a myth folded into the wind. Some whisper that he vanished into the wilderness, walking until he met the dawn. Others claim he founded a new order, teaching banishers to temper judgment with mercy. Still others imagine him as a father, his children inheriting his strange pact with both the light and the dark. We can only wonder.